many of these fake gurus and TikTokers and YouTubers, they don't really like me. In fact, they despise me. And it's okay because the feeling is very mutual. And I would, in my training and seminars, I would warn students, I would warn people, I would warn my audiences that it's not as easy as they think or they make it appear to be. So there's no life hacks to becoming wealthy. And by the way, a very important thing that I do teach not only to my audiences and participants and also my kids, there's a difference between being rich and being wealthy.
A recent study shows that Gen Z strives towards financial security and stability instead of luxury. We see the value in saving up both for ourselves and our families. But why is there a mismatch in our intentions and actions? How can we take control of our finances in an era of deserved puto? Here to school me, PhilSTAR Life columnist Angel Martinez, our entrepreneur, motivational speaker, and PhilSTAR columnist Francis Kong, and Eric Dee, the restaurateur behind beloved brands like Yao Yao, Mesa, and Tim Ho Wan. Welcome to Generations. Hi, Sir Francis and Sir Eric. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode of Generations. So, we like to start our episodes by asking our guests which generations they're from and what cultural touchstones define the eras that they grew up in. So, for example, I'm a member of Gen Z, so I grew up with One Direction, the boy band, Tumblr, the blogging website, and Rookie magazine. So, let's start with you, Sir Francis.
Oh, do I really have to do that? Now, let me just start by saying I'm the generation that belongs to being good friends with your parents, all right? Will that be? And so I belong to the boomer generation, the generation that is post, shall we say, this is from the 1946 to 1960, officially speaking, technically speaking. So it's a fast disappearing generation already, and this is the time when the workforce, work ethics, money management, money attitude, and everything is extremely different from what we find today.
How about you, Sir Eric?
Well, I think I belong to the millennial, but specifically, I think there is a subgenre in the millennials where it's called Xennial. So I think that's 1970s to 1985, something like that, which I think I belong to more, which is a transition from, I think, Gen X to the millennials, right? In the sense now, we saw the internet develop from 16.6 kbps modems. We've gone through kind of like CD-ROMs, laser discs, and all that sorts, right? So that's my generation. So I think we get the best of both worlds of seeing how it's done or how we got into this internet era and kind of still have that old school feel.
Mm-hmm. So that's perfect. From the point of view of a boomer and an exennial, I wanted to ask what kind of mindsets you had towards money when you were my age. So for context, I'm 25. And who would you say was the biggest influence that shaped your mindset towards money?
Let me see if I can still remember 25 years old of myself. Now, that's many, many years ago in the galaxy far, far away. I remember fresh out of college, looking for a job was extremely very difficult. And we live in a time when we were indoctrinated with the fact that you got to look for a job and then you stay in your job for the rest of your life. And we didn't have a lot of options. So the money, I would suppose, just like any generation, when you're young and you're early, you're a little bit carefree. So the little money that you make, you might want to spend a little, especially when you're single. And let me give you a little bit of a trivia. In the business community where I operated, especially among the Chinese community, we have a belief at that time. You don't do business with anybody who's not married. And that's why the sales rep from different companies would wear fake wedding bands so that they can sell. In other words, they're saying that if you're not married, you're not serious and you're not matured yet. So that's the kind of environment I came from. Money was extremely very difficult to look for, and if you have it, well, we were forced to save it because we know it was very it was hard to find, and yet there's still this sense of carelessness, especially when you're single. At 25, oh, that was the year I got married, so I'm transitioning from immaturity to a little bit of responsibility.
How about you, Sir Eric?
Well, 25, I guess, as far as Mr. Kong is concerned, I think I'm not super that far naman to 25. So I think I can still remember the, that age. So 25, well, similarly, I got married at 28. So I was in that transition of trying to save for a rainy day, right? I would be, you know, plastic if I say that I didn't splurge during those younger ages, but kasi naman sometimes what you want during that time is like spend it a little or enjoy what you made, right? Or what little you made. But at the same time, you have your parents at the background saying something like, "You have to save for a rainy day. Don't spend all your money. Save, save, save." Right. So there is always that conscience, I guess, on spending so much. Um, I would lie if I said I had savings. I tried, right? Rather than having savings, also I tried to be honest, is try to have more income. So rather than try to save, is try to get more money or get more income. Mga yung sideline rackets or that you would call it at that age, di ba? Parang anything that you can make money on, just let's see if we can do it, right? And that's kind of like where I got the excess others extra spending, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm gathering is your mindsets were heavily influenced by your culture and also your families. Are these mindsets also something that you're passing on to your own children, to the next generations of your families, maybe?
So I think a very hard and humble beginning is a very good lesson in life, where we were made to understand it's extremely difficult to make money and to have money. And so, and during those days, you don't have a lot of shiny little new things that can attract you from departing from your money, but it's all about existence. It's all about trying to make things meet, especially newly married at that time. So I knew instinctively that the first most important thing I got to teach my kids is to maintain a simple, humble lifestyle and to work hard for what you can do. However, one caveat, because I did not come from we were not extremely poverty, but we were not even comfortable. We were struggling. My parents were not in business. So one thing I've learned and one thing I've emphasized in them is that I want you to become business people when you grow up. You have to become entrepreneurs because it's the only way that can make you transition from having to struggle with everything else and then having the opportunity to make money. And so it starts with saving. It starts with having a very simple life. It starts with appreciating every single cent that you make. And most importantly, it also operates on the platform of trustworthiness, especially in the community of business. You can't get away with being a criminal. Our During those days, our Marites network is different than today, right? So that's the kind of mental attitude I pass on to my kids.
How about you, Sir Eric?
I have three kids, 12, 8, and a 2-year old. I try my best, right? Like I said, because I'm in that age, in Xennial age, wherein I want to save money, but I also want to enjoy it. So torn in between. So sometimes I let it out on the kids, kind of like spoil them a little bit. But I try to let them understand that you need to work for your money. Although my parents would disagree that that's the type that we do is a little bit too simple. Because back then, my parents would do your summer job, go work in a restaurant, and then once whatever you earn there, you can use to buy your stuff. Ours is a little bit simple. I just had them go to kind of do better grades. I give them a reward, but smaller things to get them. It's a reward system, I guess. That's what I'm trying to teach them, that it's not everything comes to their laps. It's easier said than done, of course. As we become successful, I think the we want to show them also that we worked hard for this, but at the same time trying to balance, right? What I'm trying to teach them also is not to be materialistic. I think what I'm trying to teach them is I spend on experiences and not on material things, and which I've only learned as I aged, and which is I want what to teach them is that eventually you're going to realize is that it's not the material things that stay. It's those moments that you create, or the moments on time where you do unforgettable things, and those are the ones that are important.
Hmm. I don't think that's very far off also from my experience, because like I grew up an only child and my parents were very careful not to spoil me. So it was also like simple lifestyle, like a very rewards based kind of system in our house. But from what I'm observing, kasi among members of Gen Z, a lot of us don't really turn to our parents anymore like as our primary source of influence because of social media. Like there are a lot of feeling finance gurus, mga like hustle bros who teach us na all of us can save money, all of us can become millionaires. And then if we don't, it's kind of like a personal failing. I don't know if you guys have seen that online, like the way that people on TikTok talk to their audience. But what do you have to say about this kind of like reductive advice that our generation is exposed to on social media?
Oh, Angel, I didn't know that that was your background. I've always thought that you're a Nepo baby, so I'm happy you're not. So there's a little bit of disclosure I want to give you. Many of these fake gurus and TikTokers and YouTubers, they don't really like me. In fact, they despise me. And it's okay because the feeling is very mutual. And I would, in my training and seminars, I would warn students, I'll warn people, I'll warn my audiences that it's not as easy as they think or they make it appear to be. So there's no life hacks to becoming wealthy. And by the way, a very important thing that I do teach not only to my audiences and participants and also my kids, there's a difference between being rich and being wealthy. And so most of these people are teaching is that they teach you to be rich. They don't teach you to be wealthy. If you want to know the distinction, even a financial real McCoy guru like Morgan Housel would say, rich is usually visible. That new car, that orange colored box that contained a very expensive bag, and the red sole under the stiletto, and all those watches. Those are visible things. But you don't see the invisible trait. Are they utang? Are they borrowed? Are they coming from unworthy sources? You don't know that. Wealth is usually invisible. Wealth is having a very healthy relationship with God and with each other in the family. Wealth is having health. Wealth is protecting our integrity and protecting our namesake in the community that begins to become the capital for further expansion of our business opportunities. So that's the kind of mindset I've taught the kids ever since, so that they won't go wrong. And happy to say that by now they're all entrepreneurs and they're doing very well.
That's actually very interesting advice. I didn't know that there was a key distinction between being rich and being wealthy. Sir Eric, by any chance, are you also enemies with TikTokers and YouTubers who peddle financial advice, or not really?
I think I want to echo what Mr. Francis Kong has mentioned. I think it's there's a lot of them. I'm afraid of what's available out there. It's hard to decipher the real from the fakes. I've had personal experiences with these so-called gurus that are ended up being scammers, right? Um, it's just that it's so easy to have a persona, but then what the kids are exposed to, it's hard for them to decipher what's real and what's not, and most oftentimes it leads them to a certain belief that's skewed, right? Thinking that they should be this, they should be that in order to be this. And that's because it's what they see. And I think for us it starts at home. the foundations of being strong at home, that we're not going to be so afraid that they will be coming home and say that, hey dad, something's wrong with what I'm seeing online, or they know what's wrong and what's right. So, before, I think, during our generation, our parents are sending us to school academically, or do well in school, get A's. For me now, I'm be a balanced child, right? Be a balanced child. I don't need you to be a straight A student. Neither do I want you to be, the quietest or most well behaved. I just want you to have fun and know what right and wrong is. And that's kind of like where we're trying to teach. And I think with what's going on in TikTok, I mean, I'm very exposed to it. I have businesses around it. So don't get me wrong, but it's just so much fakes, right? And it's hard to tell them to teach that, right? That how to decipher that. So being able to kind of like set up the foundations, I think, is more important to get them ready for this. We can't avoid it, right? I always tell my wife, right? You can't let them, don't watch this, don't watch that, because eventually they will, right? So it's just a matter of guiding them and letting them understand what they're looking at. Um, Easier said than done, of course, but I think hiding them from these things will cause more trouble eventually, because they're gonna find it. They're gonna be like, "Oh, this is why my parents never let me watch this." Lumalabas yung parang the rebellious type, diba? I remember my age, right, when they were telling me, "Oh, just don't do this," without explanation, right? And the mind thinks of, wait, why? I want to know why. And then you ended up, oh, cigarettes, or smoke a cigarette. Oh, why is it bad? And then you realize, oh, okay, I don't want a cigarette pala, diba? But it gets to that point where, so that's what we're kind of like trying to train them, right? Diba? Parang knowing it without, by explaining it too. I think back then, I think everything was like, sexual education was all like quiet, like parang you learn it from a friend who makes it belong to you. It's sometimes 90% accurate or 50% accurate, you wouldn't know. And eventually, when it comes to that point lang, ay, yung pala yung sinasabi nila. So, it's come to an age where which I try to be open with my kids. I try to explain to them, because I think they're eventually gonna have to face it anyways.
That's another differences between our generation. Because during our generation, they just tell you what to do, what not to do without any explanation at all.
Yes.
That's very different, and it doesn't work that well. So we will, and Eric is right. Huh? Whenever they say don't, I'll do. When they say no, yes.
It's a
So
reverse psychology.
yeah, exactly. So now, what I've learned from my parents is that there's a very creative way that you can teach your kids. And of course, we know the cliche, but it's not the reason why it's a cliche, because there's a semblance of truth within it. They Our kids may not exactly believe 100% we say, but they certainly believe 100% they see us do. So I'm very careful in portraying an example for them to see that I really mean what I said. And but there are always creative ways. But the most important thing is to explain, not sermonizing, but to explain the reason why, and to give a contrast. If you do this, this is what's going to happen. If you don't do this, this might be what's going to happen. Uh, every generation, by the way, I'll give you one good example. Every younger generation is more educated, more informed, and more intelligent than the previous one. That means for tonight, I'm the one with the farthest advantage of them all, right? you have you have to have that communication skills. You got to have that creative process in making a lesson learned and learned by your kids. So yeah, that's a difference in our generation.
Hmm. Sir Francis, you mentioned an interesting point a while ago about like how your generation just did what they were told. And I know that one key piece of advice that came from those from your demographic was like to save for retirement, then buy a house, get a stable job. Like you had a very cookie cutter way of life. But Gen Z, we're kind of coming of age in a very turbulent time. We're jumping from one job to another. We don't even live in a traditional house anymore. So do you think that this advice that worked very well for your generation still applies today for us?
as I mentioned earlier, it all depends on the context of where you're coming from. Like in our context, we would be advised not only by the parents, but the older folks who would say, Francis, your timeline is this. By the time you reach 40 and you are not a millionaire, you're done. You will plateau. From that time on, you're going to go down. So whether you save up or you just lose your opportunity, that's up to you. And by the way, when I was your age and a little bit younger than Eric then, our longevity is only about 60 to 65. I mean, you compute a person's average mortality in terms of 60 years old, they're done. So that's the kind of timeline that we have to operate on. We, in my case, I was not even taught retirement because my parents didn't understand what it was. But it's always make a lot of money, buy a big house so that you can own the car and then be safe with it. That's it. So that was the kind of teaching we had at that time.
Mhm. So, how then would both of you define what financial security is? And maybe you can also talk about how this meaning changed over time for you guys. So, does it mean being debt free? Does it mean accumulating a certain amount of worth or something else entirely? Sir Francis, I'll give you time to ruminate on that question so we can start with Sir Eric.
Yeah.
Sure. Um, I'm always against debt. For me, I think work within your means. Easier said than done again, right? But I believe that even in business, as we do it, right, we are a little bit more conservative. And that's what I guess I learned from the previous generation and the millennial side of things, right? What I learned is you need to still have foundations, right? I grew up in a traditional business setting. My parents always taught me how to do business in the traditional sense of way. But I've also been in a startup world wherein they pour money and you're supposed to
Oh.
spend and you're supposed to be fine that may be, not profitable, but looking at more on scale. So there's that different aspect of it. Um, for me, I believe that, you again, the olden times of, cliches of save for a rainy day. That's always kind of like my parents have always put that into me, and it kind of grew on me, right? Although sometimes I would like to, my parents always said delay gratification, which I find a little bit hard to do. So I guess that's the millennial in me na.
The only kind of financial security is a lifelong investment on your capability to make more. And that means even though we were in very difficult situations, just to give you an example, I created a name for myself in the garments industry when I invented the local jeans brand. And that propelled me into entrepreneurship. But before that, my job was to fix mannequins in show windows. That was how low the job was. But I had a good mindset. My mindset reminded me that there's no such thing as a humiliating job as long as you're not stealing. But it's just a little difficult. The pay is extremely low. I was being paid like 2,500 pesos per month, and my wife was making a little bit more. She was making about 3,005. How do you make that money fit in with one child growing up? So that was very tough. But here's the key. Angel, by the way, I'd like you to know that your partner in life, your spouse, is crucial to your entire life adventure. So I'm so
Agree.
blessed because the Lord did not only give me a lady who graduated from an accounting course. Uh, he still loves me today because he still keeps on laughing at the old jokes he's heard thousands of times already. And I can live without her because I'm totally under her control in terms of finances. Right? When I would when I would like to fancy myself to buy something else, he would say, "No, sweetheart, we're tight. We don't have money." But every time I say, sweetheart, I need money to buy a book. And a book at that time was costing about 400, 500, 600. That's a lot of money for us. She will release the budget and then she'll sacrifice. But that formed the way for me to educate myself until now. I'm 70 years old. I'm still learning. I'm still studying. And just like what Eric shared, the most liberating feeling right now is I don't have a single cent of debt, right? And secondly, that's liberating. Secondly, we've kept and stored a little bit money for emergency. My wife had a stroke last year, and every day, trust me, money is like water flowing out from a river into the sea every single day. So we're comfortable. We're not very wealthy, but we're comfortable. We're debt free, and the financial security simply means the ability to still convert what you have invested in your education, experience, and insights, and network, and collaboration, and everything else. That still enables you to be productive, not because you have to, but because you want.
Mm-hmm.
And one more
Right.
thing before I go there. Uh, like what Eric said, you have to live within your means, and that's very, very safe, and that's very, very true. But I'd like to expand that a little bit. Uh, I would add a little bit of nugget, like you don't just live within your means, you increase your means because we have aspirations, we have dreams, but you got to make sure that your income does not catch up with your nepo baby style lifestyle. And this is now, as North Code Parkinson would say, managed elevation. As you elevate in your income, you manage it to make sure that you don't go beyond it. So these are things I've learned over the many years of my existence in this decayed planet.
Yeah. Thank you both for your wisdom. What I'm learning, of course, is that it takes a lot of discipline, right? Even foresight, like delaying gratification to be able to achieve this financial security that we want to attain. But just for context, also, like Gen Z, even if we acknowledge these things, it's very hard for us to implement it in daily life. Partially also because of the rise of like e-commerce platforms, like the rise of retail therapy, of budol culture, as we call it. We're even criticized on social media for keeping up appearances, like constantly comparing ourselves to other people. So Eric, I see you laughing. This question is for you. What advice would you give to younger people who fall into this trap quite easily?
um, kung mabubudol na lang kayo, get budled on experiences, like I said. At least something that you can learn of. Don't be too materialistic, di ba? Dahil wala namang mapapalayan, I would go travel than buy a new iPhone. I would go travel than buy an expensive shirt or an expensive pants, right? For me, I think that part of my life, I think traveling and exploring has been very beneficial for me. So I look at it as more, not as a spending, but as an investment, right? Like, having my kids see the world, that it's not just this, right? There is a world beyond the Philippines. There's a world beyond everything else, right? So I think the understanding of that and multicultural aspect, right? I actually was educated in the US. So I came home to the Philippines again, having that two sides, right? Like my generation, I also have two sides, which I think luckily, right, I get to balance that out.
Mhm.
That's true.
Okay, I think Gen Z can also definitely relate to that, like going to concerts or like really traveling
Yes.
abroad with the girls. Yeah,
Diba?
definitely. Okay, so I feel like in this episode, we talk a lot about Gen Z shortcomings in spending and saving. But Sir Francis, based on your experience and observations interacting with us whenever you conduct trainings and talks, what do you think Gen Z is doing right naman?
I present this in my seminars. I would say whenever I deal with people almost my age in the audience and everybody laughs, during our time, I would say, wow, pare, ang ganda naman ng designer clothes mo. What brand is it? So it's either Burberry or whatever. Today, when you find certain Gen Z, they're so smart. They will say, hulaan mo how much this is. 150 pesos, carousel, bring home. Now, my son asked me a question and he says, Dad, is it okay if I open a restaurant here in Mandaluyong, Calbayog? It's not known to be a foodie place. I said, Puede, provided you meet three conditions. Number one, you have a good product and good service. Number two, you have extremely good reviews. And number three, you're gonna target which market. When he says Gen Z, I said, go, open. He opened a restaurant here in Calbayog, Mandaluyong, September of last year. It's now top 50 in the Philippines now. And it's all full. I hate eating in his restaurant. I'm the oldest guy there. They're so smart. They will review, they will check, they'll go, but they don't have brand loyalty, by the way. That's the number one problem I established. And then and then they'll skim on everything. They'll review, they'll only spend on two things. Number one, I'm associated with a travel company, right? I'm associated with Primer Travel Club, right? So number one, they'll spend on travel, and number two, they'll spend on Taylor Swift.
A
Yeah,
personal
and then
attack.
some of them will go back and then look for other ways of making money from e-commerce. I've met so many Gen Zs who are earning millions just by doing drop shipping or doing e-commerce and
Yeah.
doing other stuff. So they're very entrepreneurial. And my advice is you gotta learn to be entrepreneurs because it's going to be very difficult to maintain. Jobs are going to be very scarce. Maintaining your career now is going to be. I mean, you're not fighting with anybody else now. You're going to be fighting with automation and AI and everything else. So that should be a tool now that enables you to be good with entrepreneurship and so forth and so on. And I'm just dealing with Gen Z. We haven't talked about Generation Alpha yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That's a completely different level. There's a completely different level needed to engage with Gen Alpha is also what I'm learning. Um, One thing that you mentioned about Gen Z, thank you for complimenting us as a generation, that I do think is true is that like we do like learn and do a lot of things on the fly. Like we're very entrepreneurial. We're quick on our feet. But for the people who can't or don't like take up business ventures like that, what would you say are like actual effective tips on how they can be more financially savvy in their own lives, like on an individual level? Let's say maybe we can start with what do you guys think is the non-negotiable minimum percentage of income that a young person should save so that they can build like a cushion of savings? Maybe Sir Eric, you can start.
I would say if you could save 10%, that would be good. Good enough. Because a lot of people are negative and may utang pa. So
Yeah.
if you can save at least 10% of what you're making, that would be good enough to set aside. That's small enough, but I think that would, grow if you could set that aside. But I don't think it's big enough, but at least it's a start. Um, I think saving also is understanding the needs and wants, right? Do you need it versus do you want it only, right? And of course, sometimes you might think that you need something you want, but always have second thoughts, naman. For me, what also helped, um, I used to buy a lot of gadgets. I'm into gadgets, and sometimes I buy the gadgets for the sake of just toying around with it without the necessarily keeping it for long enough or even using it. What I realized helped me a lot is unboxing videos because I only like to watch the fact of okay, how does it look like? What if you press this button? What happens? And that already satisfies my need and no more shopping.
Yeah, that's actually such a good point because a lot of like the happiness that comes with the purchase is just like the dopamine rush of something arriving at your door, right?
Yes,
And then like
yes.
once the novelty wears off, you're like, "Ay, ba't ko nga ba to binili?" Like the buyer's remorse just
Exactly.
starts to set in,
So
right?
parang sa unboxing video lang pala pwede na.
Right. Sir Francis, do you have any specific tips on how Gen Z naman can build like a sustainable saving routine, like setting aside a certain amount on a certain day for a certain goal, anything like that, or no?
It's a general principle and formula that's being taught all over the place. This is called the 50-30-20 rule. So 50% of your income, you gotta spend that on your food and your transport and all those necessities. 30% of your income now could be spread out into certain things that, if you're single, by the way, if you're married, then you have to expand your 50% a little bit more because that's going to be part of your necessities. 30% would be a little bit of buying and I would call this value shopping. If there is a mindset in money management I teach, it is to understand the difference between price and value. So if you buy something that's very expensive, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. If it can last you for 20 years and even appreciate in value, like certain watches, I'm sure Eric would know what they are, and then that's a good buy. Now, even if you buy disposable fashion like what you buy from Temu and Shein and everything else, that's a lot. It doesn't carry a lot of value. And so, and then the remaining 20% you will keep, invest, save, and then give. Be part of your lifestyle is to be able to give, and you'll be amazed when you learn how to bless others and you learn how to give. uh, it psychologically and spiritually helps you understand that we are stewards of the money that's given us, and it's not something for us to use to ourselves, but we're going to be channels of blessings to other people. So that's why a lot of these fake gurus teach money and investment as if they were teaching laws of physics. No, it doesn't happen that way. It has a lot to do with human behavior. It's got to do a lot with economics. It's got to do a lot with psychology. And so it's the mindset thingy that is more important thing. And that would be my advice for the Gen Z. Follow that rule. And as Eric would say, winter is coming. That's not Game of Thrones. But,
Well, to cap off this episode, since we've already talked about a lot of practical strategies, I do also want to double down on, as both of you mentioned, having the right mindset. So, what are some last words that you can share with members of Gen Z? Like, how can we define financial security and stability for ourselves on our own terms?
I'll start off, I guess. Well, as a Gen Z, I guess I would want them to continue doing as far as, wanting to do a lot of things. Fail at an early age. I think that's an important thing because I think how you react to failure would define your success. Right. Some when you fail, when you get older, sometimes it's harder to get up. But once you're used to, wag naman, don't get used to failing naman. But meaning that if you know how to fail and then stand back up again, that's more important, right? That defines you, right, on how you react to a failure. So doing that at an early age, I learned how to fail at an early age, and that made me stronger than weaker, right? I think that's there's always my son specifically, always kind of perfectionist, is always afraid. He's always too stiff. I worry at him sometimes because he feels that, he cannot fail. But then, and when he fails, it's such a big deal. I just tell him, you have to learn how to stand up. Tomorrow is another day, right? It might sound cliche again, but, it's not the end of the world. So I think a lot of what I'm seeing, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, is that they're a little bit fragile. I'm seeing that fragileness. So letting them understand how to fail and stand up is more important at the moment, and making you a balanced person.
mhm, perfect. Well, I think you just preempted what I was about to say. My one and only advice to Gen Z of different genre and different contexts is just one. One common thing. Don't be too emotional. Learn to manage your moods and your emotions. And there's a growing bunch of Gen Z now that experts and sociologists are saying that are displaying the characteristics of boomers like us. Why? Pandemic, failing economy, difficulty, but but because of social media and everything else, they're not too much exposed with interactions with people. And that's why mental health for them is a little bit more volatile than ever. But I would like to suggest that they have to learn how to develop perseverance and mastery over their moods and emotions. If they do, the whole world is their opportunity. And one more thing, the best life skill is to build their competence to be able to create more wealth in the future. That's the best investment ever. So stay curious, continue learning, and by the way, you actually don't have any option. When everything is changing now, you and I are forever rookies. And that's why we have to continuously learn and develop ourselves and to understand that we got to work for it. And then all of those things that were shared by Eric tonight, follow them, you won't go wrong.
Mhm. That is a perfect way to end this episode. I always love podcast episodes like this actually because they feel like life coaching sessions for me. Thank you so much again for your time and your insights, Sir Francis and Sir Eric. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to PhilSTAR Live on YouTube and Spotify. This has been Generation.